We've got a bombshell brewing that proves, once again, the MAGA agenda isn't just cruel, it's illegally unconstitutional. Yesterday, a federal appeals court absolutely demolished Donald Trump's sweeping, economy-crippling tariffs, exposing his pathetic attempt to rule by fiat and unilaterally fleece the American people. This isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's a brutal, undeniable humiliation for the man who thinks he's above the law.
Just moments ago, actually, a federal appeals court ruled most of President Trump's tariffs are illegal. The court is saying the president exceeded his authority in imposing those levies. There's a catch, though, in this ruling. Correspondent David Spunt has details tonight, breaking just minutes ago. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening. The catch is that the tariffs can stay in place until October 14th. That's when the mandate from the circuit court, the federal circuit court appeals decision actually kicks in. This was a 127-page decision that just came down within the last 30 minutes. We're reading it, but it finds that most of the president's tariffs are unconstitutional.
That's right. Even Fox News is forced to admit this is a major story. But let's be clear, this isn't just some technicality. This is a foundational, constitutional crisis averted, thanks to a court that actually respects the rule of law. Trump's entire economic agenda, a chaotic mess of tariffs that have cost everyday Americans billions, has been exposed as a lawless power grab.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We've got some breaking news just now on the central economic policy of this Trump administration. In a huge blow to the White House and its agenda, and a big win, I would say, for everyone else, a federal appeals court has just ruled that Trump's sprawling tariffs are unlawful and invalid. Of course, the president has been obsessed with imposing his willy-nilly tariffs on Americans. In fact, it has been the central plank of his entire economic agenda. Now, it has been wildly unpopular. It's polling underwater. It is costing consumers and corporations billions and billions of dollars by the day. It's stopping the Fed from cutting interest rates by driving inflation. It has, on the whole, been really bad economic policy. And most of the discussion of these tariffs have been focused on that. But there's also something about these tariffs, which is that from the jump, they've been pretty clearly illegal. I mean, think about it for a second. Can the president just by himself create tariffs that raise hundreds of billions of dollars with zero congressional input? These tariffs are a violation of the law that they purport to use as the justification, and a violation of the spirit of the Constitution of a country which was quite literally founded on the belief the executive cannot unilaterally just impose a tax without representation, specifically tariffs.
As Chris Hayes so perfectly lays it out, Trump's obsession with imposing these willy-nilly tariffs has been disastrous. Wildly unpopular, driving inflation, and costing you, the American consumer, a fortune. Remember when coffee prices shot up? That's Trump's illegal taxes hitting your wallet. And the worst part? He didn't even bother to ask Congress, because he knew they'd say no. The court's ruling, a resounding 7-4, found that Trump grotesquely misused the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law that was never intended to give the president carte blanche to impose a global tax. This isn't just bad policy, it's a direct assault on the Constitution itself. Former acting Solicitor General, Neal Katyal, who valiantly argued this case on behalf of small businesses, perfectly articulated the stakes.
You know, the president under our Constitution is given no power to impose tariffs. Our founders expressly gave that to the Congress in Article 1, Section 8. And President Trump himself recognized that last time when he was president. He went and asked Congress for the authority to tariff, and they said no. So President Trump this time around just did it on his own. And what we said is you can't do that under the laws and Constitution of the United States. And that's what I'm glad to see the court reaffirm today.
He went to Congress and they said no. So what does a wannabe dictator do? He just does it on his own. This is the unhinged, authoritarian mindset we've been warning you about. The Guardian reports that the judges found that Trump's measures were unbounded in scope, amount, and duration, asserting expansive authority that is beyond the express limitations of the law. And what was the MAGA king's response to this decisive legal defeat? Predictably, a full-blown meltdown on Truth Social. He screamed about a highly partisan appeals court because any court that rules against him is, by definition, partisan, right? He claimed the ruling would be a total disaster for the country and would literally destroy the United States of America. The sky is falling, the USA is doomed, all because he can't illegally tax you anymore. This pathetic attempt to rewrite reality is classic Trump.
He just posted seconds ago, all tariffs are still in effect. Today, a highly partisan appeals court incorrectly said that our tariffs should be removed, but they know the United States of America will win in the end. If these tariffs ever went away, it would be a total disaster for the country. It would make us financially weak, and we have to be strong. The USA will no longer tolerate enormous trade deficits and unfair tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers imposed by other countries, friend or foe, that undermine our manufacturers, farmers, and everyone else. If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America. At the start of this Labor Day weekend, we should all remember that tariffs are the best tool to help our workers and support companies that produce great Made in America products. For many years, tariffs were allowed to be used against us by our uncaring and unwise politicians. Now, with the help of the United States Supreme Court, we will use them to the benefit of our nation and make America rich, strong, and powerful again. Thank you for your attention to this matter again.
Think about that for a second. He actually claims that if he can't illegally impose tariffs, it would literally destroy the United States of America. What an utterly delusional, unhinged tyrant. The truth, as The Guardian clarifies, is that his own Justice Department warned that revoking the tariffs might mean refunding some of the $159 billion in import taxes already collected, a financial blow to the U.S. Treasury, not ruin for the entire country. The real disaster was Trump's policy to begin with, which the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation called the largest tax increase on Americans since 1993. But let's be real, his appeals to the Supreme Court are as transparent as his attempts to strong-arm Congress. Neal Katyal, the architect of this victory, is ready for them.
Why you think the court sided with you?
Yeah, we were very gratified to see the court overwhelmingly rule in our favor by a 7-4 vote. And, you know, the decision here is about something you were just talking about with Molly, the checks and balances that are laced into our Constitution. And in some places, you're absolutely right, those checks have eroded, but not here. The court said, absolutely, there's a fundamental constitutional line that our founders gave us, and that in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is that the president can't impose tariffs on his own. You've got to have Congress. And Donald Trump himself understood this because in his first time he was president, he asked Congress for these tariff powers, and Congress said no. And so this time he didn't even bother going to Congress. And that's what the court was saying was so problematic. Look, maybe they said you need to have these tariffs. You just flashed his Truth Social post up saying these tariffs are essential. Maybe you need to have them, but the thing you have to do is go to the Congress and make your case. You can't just do it with the stroke of your own pen.
So, Neal, that weakness that Congress did not enact these tariffs that the appeals court found in their ruling, how is that going to influence the Supreme Court when they make their deliberations in the next round of this battle?
Well, unlike Donald Trump, who's predicting and claims he knows how the Supreme Court will rule, I don't. I'm a constitutional scholar. I can tell you that the constitutional case against Donald Trump's tariffs is overwhelming, as the judges yesterday found. But the court's going to consider this in due course. And, my hope is actually that the Trump administration will do the right thing and follow what the court said yesterday, which is go to Congress and try and seek their approval instead of rushing to the Supreme Court and putting the Supreme Court in that difficult position. There's an easy way to do this and there's a hard way to do this. And unfortunately, he's picked the hard and the less constitutional way of doing it.
Katyal absolutely nails it. This isn't a liberal victory. It's a victory for the rule of law. Even conservative attorney George Conway, no friend to Trump, called the court's reasoning ironclad and slammed the idea that Congress would hide elephants in mouse holes by implicitly granting such massive power without explicit language. He said the Supreme Court would ultimately affirm the decision. The idea that this far-right Supreme Court would somehow side with Trump on this constitutional overreach is pure fantasy.
How do you think they're going to rule? I know we got to be careful about trying to get into their heads, but you've been there.
Look, I mean, I think that the reasoning of the Federal Circuit is absolutely ironclad. I mean, you cannot. No one has ever used that statute, whose name I can't remember. It's an IAEPA or whatever, to impose taxes before, to impose tariffs before. I mean, all it talks about is the regulation of commerce, and it's very, very vague in that regard. And there's an old kind of an adage that's applied to interpreting statutes, congressional statutes, which is Congress doesn't hide elephants in mouse holes. In other words, if it really wanted to give this massive power to the president, it would have been more explicit about it. And you just don't see it on the face of the statute. And I think the Supreme Court's going to ultimately affirm it, although I think the Federal Circuit did a smart thing by staying its decision so that the Supreme Court doesn't go in on it kind of half-assed, which it's been doing in a lot of other situations.
Giving it some time to breathe.
Yeah, give it some time to breathe and not feel like they have to make a decision immediately to protect the government from its own folly here.
This isn't an isolated incident. This legal smackdown is just one piece of a larger, escalating pattern of public outrage and legal accountability hitting the MAGA movement. While Trump is busy declaring his illegal tariffs are still in effect, the groundswell of popular anger against his agenda is becoming impossible to ignore.
There have been a lot of town halls, just public appearances in general, where Republicans who are brave enough now to go out in public have been met with lots of things. I want to play this Susan Collins getting booed at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's very funny. It says no transcript because it's just boos and heckles. Let's watch. And now let's take a look at Barry Moore, representative from Alabama, escaping out of a town hall after getting heckled so much.
So the process for a citizen and a non-citizen are different.
False. Lies. The 5th and 14th Amendments allow for it. The Supreme Court has backed it many times. Shame. Bye, Felicia.
That 90s movie, Bye Felicia, still giving to this day.
You saw that, right? Susan Collins getting booed out of a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Barry Moore getting heckled and running for cover. This isn't some interest group, as some Republicans want to pretend. This is real Americans, angry as hell, demanding accountability from their so-called representatives. And it is having effect. Joni Ernst isn't running for re-election, in part because she faced an angry town hall where people told her, "People are going to die from your vote." And her dismissive response was, "We're all going to die."
Joni Ernst decided not to run for re-election. Perhaps one of the reasons why she decided not to run for re-election is she faced a town hall in which people said to her, "People are going to die from your vote." And she said, "We're all going to die." And I think that she looked at the polls. You know, there was a poll out this week showing...
Well, guess what, Joni? Your political career just did. The Quinnipiac poll confirms what we've been saying. Voters disapprove of Trump's top issues across the board: the economy, trade, crime, even sending troops to D.C. These are all sinking him and his party. This court ruling isn't just about tariffs. It's a brutal reminder that the Constitution means something, and that even the most unhinged politicians cannot simply rewrite it to suit their whims. Trump's illegal taxes on the American people have been exposed, his economic agenda left in shambles, and the illusion of his unchecked power shattered. This is a monumental defeat for the MAGA movement and a crucial victory for the American people and the foundational principles of our democracy. The legal walls are closing in, and the American people are watching.